Yes. Yes. Oh god, no. No, 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 no. Please, no, 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 no!
Hey, so we got your message about needing a transport. Unfortunately, due to the recent attacks from the Voids, the next transport can arrive in 30 days. So I guess just do your best to stay alive, and we'll find you when ready.
If I don't survive, may you find this journal and this camera and know what happened. A malfunction in the device has caused me to end up stranded in a brutal Arctic wasteland, known as Canada. But not some zombie-filled, internet-cryptid horrorland Canada, no. Similar to our own worlds, actually. Just normal Canada. And thanks to a monster of my own making, I'm stuck surviving here for 30 days until help hopefully arrives. So, let's make a guess on how long I'm able to make it. Day 1. I landed in a dusty, musty, broken down church on a dark and frigid night. Seeing as there aren't exactly ideal conditions outside, I hunkered down in the church to hold out until morning's warm. Being stuck in here and unable to sleep, I laid out the ground rules for survival. It's actually pretty easy. Don't starve, don't thirst, don't bleed, and hardest of all, don't freeze. 4 very basic and very easy tasks to manage, right? I guess we'll see. As morning's light broke, I exited the church and ventured into the thick, snowy fog, raiding 3 cars along the way, acquiring a flare, ketchup chips, and most useful, a hatchet. Crossing over a bridge and heading down the road, in a grand stroke of luck I came across the town of Milton. I then went from building to building, scavenging everything my pockets could hold, including, but not limited to, dog food, pants, sodies, matches, charcoal, nuts and stuff, hemorrhoid medication, cloth and cream, normal socks, cum socks, a dead man, a hunting knife, and last but not least, piss water! I'm happy to report that we had many great offers, but the toilet that offered the most piss water was the one that gifted a whopping 1.9 liters of piss. After my accumulation of items, my pack was ever so slightly heavy, so I hunkered down in one of the abandoned homes and spent some time sorting through my loot. And after a successful first day, it was time to rest. Day 2. With the town of Milton sacked, it was time to head out on the road once more, and to minimize weight, I left some stuff behind, creating a stash house in doing so. I continued down the road until I came upon a collapsed tunnel with a prisoner bus. The vehicle held nothing, but there was a corpse nearby that held a bandage and what appeared to be nothing more than a stick. Incompetence will get you killed out here, and lucky for me, I've plenty of incompetence to spare, such as deciding to run around in temperatures that will freeze your balls off. Seeing a nearby structure, I ran up the hill, stopping to throw rocks at some rabbits, and I actually managed to stun one, and well, take it for later. Man's gonna live. Even though the building had no door, and many smashed windows, I was freezing, and I found it as good a place as any to take shelter. I started up a fire in the stove, and I was also able to loot some food from the ground, a soda from the vendor, and a firearm cleaning kit from the shelf. Once I was warmed up, I headed out again to explore, and though I left many supplies behind, I planned on returning to the structure to stay the night. As I wandered to the top of the hill, I found a climbing rope leading down the cliffside. Naturally, I climbed down without thinking twice, and I began to explore this side cliff. There was nothing there. Realizing that was a colossal waste of time, I turned back to climb up the rope, but forgot that Newton discovered gravity, and was taught the hard way that climbing up is a lot harder than climbing down.
That hurts a lot.
Needing to rest before I was able to climb up again, I laid out my bag and took a power nap. And when I awoke, I was fucking freezing! With the little bit of strength I had left, I climbed up the rope, just barely making it to the top, and sprinted for the shelter, needing to escape the storm I had awoke to. Inside, I quickly started a fire using everything I had, and I then began to harvest the rabbit I killed for dinner, while my wet and frozen clothes dried. After a nice meal of peaches and bunny fat, I went to bed. Day 3 was as lucrative as it was uneventful. I started by returning to Milton in order to raid the stash that I had left, as well as take a nap. Upon awakening, I set out once more, this time taking a side road. And while it was incompetent to explore in the snowy fog, fate blessed my bravery and I soon found a farmhouse and a workshed. The shed was easy enough to get into due to the lack of doors, and provided me with a hacksaw and access to a workbench. The farmhouse, though, required a key. I thought for sure that I was going to end up hitting the road again, but before I did, I decided to check the back, and I found a lucky little corpse that held the key that I needed to bust inside. When I entered, I found a home stocked with plenty of useful items. I found many of the common luxuries such as food, clothing, and glorious piss water, but I found 2 things that were quite special: a few rifle bullets, and... To celebrate my new treasure, I cooked a lavish meal of tomato soup, beans, and water, and spent the rest of the day breaking down furniture into usable firewood. On the morning of day 4, I decided that this farmhouse would be my base of operations for a little while. With that, I dropped a lot of loot into the cabinets, or just on the floor, to free up some space in my pack. I also cooked a not quite as nice meal of just tomato soup and water, and while that cooked, I cleaned my gun. After reloading the weapon, I couldn't resist the urge to test it, and as I added another tally to the incompetence side of the board, I set out in search of prey. Just outside, I found a feasting wolf. I readied my scope, aimed, and missed. I did get a second chance, however, when the beast full sprinted after me when I was trying to track it down. With a successful hunt and a bullet wasted, I harvested what I could from the wolf and grabbed the rabbit it was feeding on. After cooking and eating a meaty meal, I spent the rest of the day exploring the land around the farm, finding a maple sapling, which I decided to break off for no apparent reason. I also discovered another dead body with a timber plug and some crow feathers. Finally, I found an incline where I threw rocks at a rabbit, killing it with much more haste than before, and additionally I stopped to harvest a deer corpse I found before heading back to the cabin where I ate food and went to sleep. Upon awakening on day 5, I was met with the sounds of a blizzard that threatened to tear the house apart, and decided that the day would be better used to clean, sharpen, and repair my tools. Day 6 was a start day that turned into something very lucrative. I began with a nice breakfast of chips and meat and a nice tin of water, followed by an early morning rabbit hunt, but upon heading back to my humble abode, I saw another wolf stalking the fields. With 1 bullet left, I decided it was best not to have an apex predator just outside. Once the beast was harvested, I went back to cook up the meat and have a little lunch. With half a day of light and nothing left to do, I decided to explore the last road leading out of Milton, which led me to a radio tower and then a cave. But after seeing a cave painting of a bear on the wall, I decided against going inside and opted to throw rocks at rabbits, collecting 2 of the furry creatures. As dusk drew near, I began to head back, but as I did, I thought, oh fuck it, in I go. Turns out, no bear inhabited the place, and I was able to find 5 more bullets for my rifle, which soon turned into 4 after I landed a devastating shot on this deer. With my pack overflowing with the succulent and smelly meat from the buck, and with a setting sun, I began to head home. And allow me to say that when this land isn't trying to kill you, it can be downright beautiful. Being exhausted, I took up shelter in a Milton home and would head out once the sun rose in the morning. Once I awoke, I picked up my bed and exited the home, eager to get back and cook some food. As it turns out, having over 9 pounds of smelly succulent deer matter attracts some unwanted attention. I lured the wolf all the way back to the farmhouse. Once near the porch, I turned with confidence and took my shot, completely missing. I managed to escape with nothing more than torn clothing, but let me give you some advice. Never let a wolf run away. Heart racing, I went inside and began to cook the meat from the deer, as well as scrap the ruined clothing, and replace what I could. Looking around the house for some new accessories, I found a bullet, and I found the book
Advanced Guns.
something that I could later research to improve my abilities with
Guns.
Having cooked everything, I headed out for some firewood, finding that the wolf had returned. And well, we can't have that. And not long after, I found another one chewing on a rabbit, but I quickly dealt with it. With the wolves dead, I harvested my recent kill and picked up the rabbit it was chewing on, then moved to take care of the other. And, well, I'll let the camera footage speak for itself. Oh my god, hi. In my delirious state, dying on the ground, I tried my best to fix the damage that had been done to me, taking incorrect treatment methods in the process. I eventually fixed up everything enough to keep moving, and in that state I made the risky choice of harvesting the old wolf, and when I was done, I ran inside before another pack showed. In a less than ideal condition, I cooked up what meat I could and went to bed, concluding this productively awful day. Having had an all too close encounter with death and my ammo depleted to a single shot, the next 4 days were spent mostly inside doing simple but very beneficial tasks. Day 8 was spent cooking wolf meat, burning one in the process, and researching a lot out of
Guns.
Day 9, I harvested the meat and hides from my 3 rabbit friends in the freezer, then spent many more hours researching from the Better Shooty book. Then I cooked some lunch, and spent the afternoon beginning to make the rabbit fur hat, and then spent my evening reading out of, you guessed it, Advanced Guns. Day 10, I finished the crafting of the rabbit hat, giving me a major bonus in heat, and also gained the well-fed benefit from being, well-fed these last few days. I then went on to have full-scale water production, and concluded by finishing the research of guns. Finally, day 11. Realizing that I couldn't stay in this humble abode forever, I began to work on a plan for where to go next. Estimating that my current supplies of food would only last a few days, I sought to take a mountain rope down to the valley below and search for potential places to go. The plan was to descend down a few times over the course of a few days, exploring bit by bit each day, and give the wolf skins that I had accumulated some time to cure so I could eventually make the wolf skin coat. So I sharpened my knife, cleaned my gun, went into fuller water production, and waited for the next day. After a hearty breakfast and a nap to escape the cold on the morning of day 12, I headed forth to take on this adventure down the mountain.
Audio log of day 12 not recovered. In-house analysis required. Most of day's content is unknown. Camera footage shows the subject's descent on the ropes. Subject then discovers an abandoned automotive machine and a ravaged animal corpse. The footage then moves forward to the subject walking through birch trees, then traversing a lake, discovering a structure later referred to as Hermit's Cabin. The subject once more attempts exploration, but due to unknown reasons, returns to the cabin.
As I awoke to the early morning of day 13, I walked outside to find, beauty. I then spent that morning next to a warm fire underneath the lit-up nighttime sky, awaiting the return of the sun. Once its golden glow pierced the sky, I ate my breakfast of salty crackers and water, and then headed out once more. While the morning was absolutely incredible, allow me to lay out the next rule for surviving the Canada. Never leave in the morning. This is a rule because every time I've left in the morning, it was fucking cold! As you may have guessed, I didn't get very far before I needed to make a fire, but I did risk frostbite so I could harvest the scrap of meat left on this deer carcass so that I could eat it for lunch. Once the winds had died down a little, I headed back out, finding the entrance to the next region. And I went through, and it was really tempting to explore these new lands, but I ultimately headed back, thinking it would be better to return when I was officially ready to leave. I then tried to explore the other side of the valley, but a wolf blocked my way, and I made the call to call it quits and head back to the farm. The venture back was met with no confrontations, and I was able to return to the farmhouse without issue, besides the overwhelming exhaustion. After I went inside, I organized the cured guts and furs by stuffing them in the freezer. Then, taking the cured maple sapling from earlier along with some of those guts, I began to work on the survival bow. That way I didn't need to be so reliant on our single bullet for protection. Upon the dawn of day 14, I made lots more water, because why not, and then spent my morning finishing the survival bow. And while I didn't have any arrows to shoot, nor the ability to make any, having the bow opened up the potential for future defense. I really need to leave this farmhouse. Though I've done quite well here so far, supplies are dwindling, but the farmhouse is also the only place with a workbench that I know of, and I have the animal skins necessary to create 2 clothing items which can make it much easier to survive the bitter cold when I leave. This leaves me with 2 options. Neither are all that great. I can either A, spend my last precious, shiny bullet of the fence to kill a deer, hopefully getting enough meat to last until I finish crafting, or 2, I can leave this region and return after gathering supplies. And while spending my last gunpowder baby isn't ideal, leaving me defenseless for the most part, I have no way of knowing what I'll find in the next region, or if I'll even be able to come back. So option A is the best I can do for now. I headed out of my bungalow, scanning the area for a wolf that may be stalking the field. I didn't find any, so I walked into the field scanning for deer instead. Feeling the wind on my face, the cold nip at my fingertips, and the heat held in my rabbit hat, I perched upon a hill, scanning the land for that brown hide. Eventually, I spotted my trophy, and as my body filled with eagerness, I ran down the hill and crawled my way closer. Then, I sat awaiting the perfect opportunity. Quickly, I ran over to assess my kill, discovering 9.3 pounds of sweet, tender, and bloody red meat to take. I carved it out and stood, running back home knowing that a wolf would soon return, and soon return one did. Unfortunately, I was currently the biggest stink around, and it ran right past the deer's body and towards me, but I made it inside before it got too close. Naturally, the day concluded with a massive cookout. The early morning of day 15 started with an electrical buzz. All at once, every light in the house began to light up and hum, and I walked outside to find the wonderfully chilling sight of an aurora, with the distant radio tower's red lights on full display. Eventually, I just sat down in the house and began to repair my clothing, and soon the lights faded to darkness once more. It's only just dawned on me that I've made it halfway to the 30 days survived. To celebrate my success, I decided to take a 3-hour nap. Then I prepped for another adventure. As I wait for the last of the skins to cure, I have nothing to do. So, in an attempt to be productive, I decided to bring a 5-pound climbing rope I found down to the region entrance. The descent down the mountain went without trouble, but as I made my way across the frozen water, I noticed that the wolf that used to be on the other side of the valley was now in my way. Without any ammo, the gun was useless, and with no arrows, so too was the bow. So I took the long way around the wolf, crawling as I drew closer. And though it took forever, and I almost snapped my ankles in the process, I managed to scoot by without any issues, and made my way to the next region, where I was able to successfully place the rope for later use. As I headed back to the farmhouse, I took the opportunity to explore the other side of the valley. Using my instinctual sonar, while mapping, I discovered a cave, and when I went to find it, I also discovered a body that had a bow, which was useless, but it also had an arrow, which was not. I then stole a tree's scraggly beard, and then some food from a bag in the cave. After the cave sacking, I began to walk home, climbing up a spire I found along the way, finding the remains of the campsite and lots of firewood to collect. I also found some peaches and more hemorrhoid cream. As much firewood as I was now carrying, and knowing that the skins weren't going to be cured on this night, I chose to make camp on top of the spire, enjoying a nice can of peaches and sipping water as I watched the sun set across the frozen terrain. The dawn of day 16 began with some hooligan behavior. At first I did the normal routine, boil some water, drink some water, and consume condensed milk. Then I activated my primal brain and reached into the flaming fire to take as many torches as I could before throwing them in all directions off the top of the spire, burning myself in the process by walking straight over the campfire to retrieve more torches. Once I had repaired the damage done to my hand, I began to head home. The first climb went without a hitch, but to be safe, I took a nap before climbing the second one. And upon awakening, I planted more torches like trail markers from the ropes to the cave. I then climbed up the second rope and walked back to the cabin. Once within, I took a nap to wait for the furs to finish curing, and when I got up, I grabbed the pelts and some guts and spent my afternoon crafting the wolfskin coat. As the sun set and nighttime fell, I headed back inside to sleep, discovering the flickering of the lights happening once more. And upon stepping outside, I was greeted to the radio tower's lights showing brightly in the distance yet again. Not understanding what all this meant for the second time, I just went to bed. I went into day 17 with a plan. I was gonna finish the wolfskin coat. Except, well, a fucking blizzard! Instead, I filled my day with lesser tasks, such as sleeping, harvesting, collecting the delectable piss water I missed, playing cards, and more sleeping, until eventually the storm passed, and then I went back to crafting, being wary of a wolf that was lurking nearby. When night came, I wasn't actually too tired, so I ate food, took a nap, and then in the dead of the night, while a blizzard raged on outside again, I worked on my coat in half-an-hour increments, taking breaks to go in and warm up. Day 18 was much the same. Woke up, ate, drank, was weary of the wolf, crafted, went inside, slept. Nighttime was a little more eventful. I woke up to the buzzing of the lights, and honestly at this point I was unfazed by the strange occurrence. Except this time I decided to flip the radio switches for fun. And then... actual music! After 18 days of non-stop creaks, wind rustling, and animal snarls, this melody being emitted from the radio brought me absolute joy. But eventually, I did need to return to the workbench, leaving the peaceful song behind. Day 19 started with a fog that looked like something expelled from Grandfather Nurgle's ass. Despite this, I continued to work on the coat through the smog. And though this was clearly once hot gas expelled from Nurgle's gluttonous fat cheeks, it was no longer hot, and I was forced to return inside when I got cold, and by the time I was able to warm up, the ass gas had already passed. I once more sat down and finally finished the wolfskin coat, and this was clearly a fantastic decision, because the heat this thing provided was tremendous enough that even the bitter cold of the night was unable to pierce my body with it on. Feeling this newfound warmth, I grabbed the deerskin and spent quite literally all night making a pair of pants to wear, and upon early morning, I had it completed, and I now wore the best in heat-trapping technology. Today was a sad day. After making base in this farmhouse for almost my entire stay in Canada, it was time to leave the nest and search for the promised land of food and shelter elsewhere. So I spent the morning packing the pack and deciding what to take and also what to leave behind. Once the pack was well balanced, I walked out the door and headed off. With 10 days left until my rescue, the name of the game is survival. Well, that's always been the name of the game, but now more than ever. So following the ropes and the marker torches, I made my way down to the valley, heading for the next region. But before I made it through, my old enemy reared its ugly head. Not wanting to waste my one arrow, I climbed as high up the hillside as I could, hoping to avoid the beast. And it actually worked! For all of 2 seconds. My ankle! Unable to move very fast, I lit up a flare, slowly wobbling and hobbling as I made my way toward the next zone, praying that the bright flare kept the wolf at bay long enough to escape. As I passed through the barrier and into the next region, the wolf was unable to follow, and I immediately dropped down to fix my ailments. Once that was done, I set out once more. Wide-eyed and hopeful, I began to explore this new land. And let me tell you, it was fruitful. There was snow, a rock, many trees, a deer. Oh, and did I mention snow? Okay, to be fair, that's not all completely true. There was also a corpse, and that corpse did hold a fire starter, so that was, pretty good. Feeling the absolute depression fill my body, I made the choice to use my one arrow killing the deer. But the deer did not go down immediately, and I had to track it, which admittedly was pretty entertaining. The snow made it easy to follow the trail of blood and tracks, so follow I did. Found it. Hey, there it is. I only harvested half the deer. I still don't know what's around and don't want to become too smelly, lest a pack of wolves devour me in my sleep. And speaking of sleep, between everything I've done today, I was absolutely exhausted. So I set up a small fire, and after cooking, eating, and a bit more harvesting, I set out to find some shelter. I decided to walk in a straight line, and through some divine miracle, I was led straight to a cave that was already set up for someone to camp in. Here, I found a snare trap, food, matches, a sleeping bag, an old book on sewing, and an old Polaroid. Seeing this as a better place than any, I gathered some firewood, started a fire, and set out the rolled up sleeping bag, then let sleep take hold of me for a little while. I woke up on the morning of day 21 very cold, and getting colder, and with very little firewood I had to venture out into the snowy winds with nothing but a torch in my hand, searching for some wood I could break down. I found it, broke it, burned it, and then ate breakfast, made some water, and did a little sleep. I woke up with a bright idea. The map displayed a climbing point, however, there was no rope in that spot. I ventured back up to where I entered the region, grabbed the rope, brought it over to the rock, and successfully deployed it. I could have gone down at that time, but I wasn't done milking this place for what it had yet. Instead, I harvested what was left on the deer and traveled back to the cave, breaking down firewood and placing the rabbit snare along the way. Once back, I sat down and studied the art of sewing, finishing the book in 4 hours. Then I started a fire and began cooking meat, in addition to boiling some water, all the while doing some more firewood runs. With that, I loaded the fire for 8 hours of burn time, and I planned to sleep through that whole period. I awoke on day 22, and then went right back to bed. Once I awoke for the second time, I went on and continued pursuing a career in lumberjacking. I then went back, ate and drank some water, and finally said goodbye to the cave before heading down the climbing rope, planning to head for what seemed like some railroad tracks in the distance. Once I got to the bottom, I traveled down the snowy slope to what I now know is a frozen lake. I now know this because, well, when trying to get to a hunting tower, I fell through the ice. After climbing back out, I made my way around the ice while my wet lower clothing froze solid in the cold. Inside the tower, I found a storm lantern, which was quite nice, and some firewood. Seeing as I am halfway through the process of freezing my balls off, I made a fire and played cards in the snow for a few hours until most of my clothes were dry enough for me to keep going. My plan was to walk the tracks and find my way to an area that has actual buildings, but a wolf was right in my way, so I tried taking the long way around and found myself staring at yet another wolf. Eventually, I said screw it and went the other direction looking for something. I then decided to travel along the old frozen rail cars, grabbing the firewood and chopping the saplings that were alongside it as I went. I made it to the end of the train cars, bringing me upon a tunnel that led to the next region. And though I was skeptical, I decided to go through, hoping to have better luck on the other side. Spoiler, there was no such luck. I found myself squeezed between two walls of rocks as I traveled down the track. I eventually came upon a landslide that prevented passage. The only ways to go from here were either down a slope, which I wasn't sure I'd be able to climb back up, or into a canyon that led in a circle back to the entrance. I went the canyon route and found a body, one that held nothing of use. Seeing night coming right for my cold cheeks, I lit a fire so that I could cook dinner, complete with the luxuries of warm peaches and water, and then threw in enough wood to burn for a 9-hour rest. I gotta be honest, things aren't looking too hopeful. I'm running out of supplies. So, over breakfast of just water and coffee, I came up with a plan. I've come from Mountain Town, worked my way down the lake and into the broken railroad, which turns out to be a dead end. But if I were to follow the railroad the other way, then I may eventually make it to the coastal highway, and where there's a highway, there must be a town. I left and began to follow the railroad. But my plan was spliced short when a wolf blocked my path. No worries, I thought. I'll just take the longer way around. After narrowly dodging a plumage into the ice, I walked through an overhang, and when I emerged, I spotted a creature that I became very excited about. There's a bear right there. That's a bear. That's not a wolf. That's too bulbous. Look how thick that thing is. There's no way that's a wolf. That is a thick ass right there. I then tried moving along the rocky cliff sides and eventually found a structure that had a pack of wolves patrolling it. So with either facing down a single wolf on the tracks, a bear, or a pack of wolves, I chose to head back and take my chances with a single wolf on the tracks. I did have to stop and make a fire while I waited for the winds to pass so I didn't freeze to death, so while I was waiting I decided to play my card game. Then I got up to move once more, harvesting a deer along the way. Jumping landmass to landmass to avoid the water, I spotted the bear from before, and on my way to the tracks I found some of his tracks. Trying to make my way onto the railroad, I was blocked by thin ice, and the only way I could see past had a wolf right there. I made an attempt to sneak past, but I had some stank, and as a result the beast smelt and charged me. I had just enough time to whip out my flare and keep the beast at bay, and I also dropped some of my meat as a decoy, which it almost didn't take. I ran the other direction, finding a much easier path to the train tracks, and I stopped to harvest some cattails during my walk, because while they weren't exactly good, they're edible. And when I was done, I set out on the tracks once more. I came across some old train cars, which I wished to loot, but my attention was pulled to a nearby deer carcass, wanting to get back that savory meat I had lost. I went to harvest his food. What the shit is this? There's food! There's food! Oh! No, 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 no. Oh my god, I'm getting chased by a goddamn bear. Holy mother of god. Oh my god, I'm getting chased by a goddamn bear. What the shit? Evasive maneuvers! Oh my god! Am I dead? Let me fight back! Let me fight back! No! As the bear walked away, I crawled in the opposite direction, bleeding heavily. Realizing I was soon going to bleed out, I stopped and began taking antibiotics to stop the infection. And upon seeing that I was using the wrong treatment for the wrong wound, I tore up my ruined mittens for cloth, right when the bear began to come back for me. I crawled around the train car, breaking line of sight, and then stood up and ran, the smell of my blood creating a path right to me. I quickly made some bandages as I watched the beast come ever closer. When I was done, I ran a little farther and then applied the bandage, as well as some hydrogen peroxide. As it would turn out, through all the madness, I actually came pretty close to the entrance to the next region. Luckily, it didn't seem to be worse in this new place. I found a box with some charcoal and some nuts and stuff, and then I found a backpack with... Oh my god! I can't catch a break! Can't catch a break! Can't! Oh my god. And now, I sit here, writing what I can while I bleed out. I'm sorry I couldn't make it. Sorry I couldn't hold out. If I'm lucky, this won't be the end.